Welcome back to Beyond Well Science. I'm Sheila Hamilton, and I'm so excited to talk to Sarah Smith. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Sarah's an activist with Mind Freedom International, and that's an organization that's dedicated to human rights in the mental health system. She's also a parent of a psychiatric survivor. I want to start with that term, psychiatric survivor. What do you mean by that?
Well, many people in today's mental health system are subjected to unwanted psychiatric interventions that they find harmful and dehumanizing. My daughter is one of those people. A psychiatric survivor identifies with having been harmed by their psychiatric treatment.
So a trauma on top of the trauma of whatever happened. And how long has she been dealing with this since she was a young woman?
About 10 years when she turned 18.
Oh, difficult. And so was this part of what propelled your interest in this, to be an activist on the behalf of people who have mental illnesses?
Absolutely. If my daughter didn't have this negative experience in the mental health system with unwanted psychiatric interventions, I think I might have been a climate activist or an environmental activist, something along the lines of what I used to do. When she had this experience, it was really my friendship with David Oakes, who is the co-founder of Mind Freedom International, that really led me to this work.
Was it forced psychiatric cure? Was she held down? Was she held against her will? Was it all of the things that you see in the movies?
Yes, from the get-go. Yeah. When my daughter was probably experiencing the worst day of her life, I brought her to the ER of the hospital, and the force started immediately. They strapped her down. They injected her by force. They terrified her. As you say, they re-traumatized her. And that started a cycle of hospitalizations, releases, hospitalizations. I just can't tell you, I can't describe the torturous feeling that I feel when I hear advocates for the so-called mentally ill call for an expansion of force and coercion in the mental health system after witnessing firsthand what my daughter experienced.
I think anybody, especially anyone who suffers from claustrophobia or has the sense of that would be horrible to be held down, should witness what actually happens in these forced holds. It is traumatizing to watch. On the other hand, the nurses, the people who are caring for them, are going to argue, we have to have our own safety taken care of. How do we find a balance there?
Well, there are many models of dealing with people in extreme states of consciousness we sometimes call psychosis. And we've only really begun to look under the hood of this really complex subject. And while looking under the hood in the last 50 years, we've found that there is a large body of accumulated knowledge about how to support people in distress in extreme states without the use of force and coercion. But for an odd reason I can't fathom, this very well-known body of evidence and research has basically been repressed by the status quo practitioners of the mental health system.
So talk to me about what you're doing at Mind Freedom and how you can actually advocate for these more progressive models of care.
Well, first of all, we believe in activism. We borrow techniques and strategies from other movements for social change. Some people say we really are the last movement for social change, representing a class of people that really are silenced and not heard in society. So first of all, we're calling for more than these so-called anti-stigma campaigns. We're calling for direct action where we actually disrupt business as usual and call people's attention urgently to the trauma that happens in the mental health system and the routine silencing of voices. So first and foremost, Mind Freedom wants to bring the stories and the narratives of psychiatric survivors to the fore. We typically are ignored by the corporate media, and our voices are silenced from the treatment rooms with doctors and nurses to the town halls where decision making and policy making takes place, and by the media. Our stories are covered up. So first and foremost, safe places so we can tell our stories and get support. To give and receive peer support is huge. Activism is a form of peer support. Changing the laws, teaching people basic strategies for how human rights are protected in society.
You mentioned forced holds, and that's obviously one of the most traumatic things that a patient can go through. But what are some of the other things that you're really opposing in the current mental health system?
Well, One of the things we're opposing is doctors and professionals and mental care providers telling false narratives to patients. Telling a patient that you have a chemical imbalance and it's like diabetes and we can correct it is really a false narrative, because there is no scientific evidence for people in distress, even people experiencing extreme states of consciousness, as having a chemical imbalance. The dopamine and serotonin theory of depression and bipolar and schizophrenia and all those other mental health labels has basically lost the battle. The scientific battle was already lost.
What do you think makes Mind Freedom work?
Mind Freedom works because most of the leadership and the energy behind Mind Freedom is from psychiatric survivors. Unlike some mental health advocacy organizations such as National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, it's not primarily made up of family members. It's made up of people with lived experience. And a lot of times in times of trouble, we turn to experts by training, but what we routinely ignore are the voices of experts by experience.
That's a really interesting way to put it. The balance between the two feels important to me, because as a person who loves a person with a mental illness, you don't want to see the behavior spinning out of control in a dangerous way, in a way that's going to break the law, in a way that's going to allow them to live homeless and in filth. So how do you think that the merging of those two systems could actually work?
That's an excellent question. And I think the missing ingredient is collaborative decision-making. I think the role of collaborative decision-making is underplayed, and there are experts in collaborative decision-making. People, even in extreme states, don't want to run out in traffic and get hit by a car. They may be experiencing strange or hearing strange, or they might be in an altered sense of reality, but there are things that can be done to ameliorate someone's extreme distress, and people can train in that. Family members can receive training. And one thing that is not offered is how to communicate with people who are in altered states of mind. And if families are supported in that process of understanding their loved one, even in their most bizarre, unexplainable or irrational states of mind, they can learn techniques of how not to aggravate someone how not to make someone even more scared or more distressed than they already feel, but keeping them safe. Most family members want to keep their loved ones safe. They have good intentions. They just don't know how to do that.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the programs that are really, really working for Mind Freedom?
Well, Mind Freedom doesn't operate any programs per se. What we do is we promote choices and alternatives through our education and outreach efforts. So we were one of the first organizations to call for a full-scale revolution in the mental health system by finding scientific allies among dissident psychiatrists and psychologists who were pioneering techniques and alternative ways of dealing with people in distress, like Soteria House is one example. Open Dialogue in Finland is another example. The power of peer support, just having a person who has walked in your shoes walk with you one of the worst moments of your life is so empowering and so helpful.
Yeah, provide that kind of hope to see somebody who appears to have it together and has been in an extreme state before, right? It's
Absolutely.
that idea that recovery is
Absolutely.
possible.
Another one of the most amazing things happening in the worldwide community right now is the emergence of a model called the Hearing Voices movement. This is a grassroots movement made up of people with lived experience who are training one another to be facilitators and run low-cost, no-cost support groups, people who hear voices or experience extreme.
Yeah. We've interviewed a couple of those people on the stage. Really, really interesting. So what do you think are the most important civil liberties that are being denied currently?
The right to choice. I would think first and foremost, when you seek help in the mental health services, you're really going to be dished up with one choice, not a buffet of choices. That one choice is usually drugs and shock, by force if necessary.
And if you thought that there was a way that someone hearing this could help you mobilize a response, what would they be doing? How would they actually interact with your group?
Well, when people call us, a lot of times they're in distress and they need a listening ear. So we want to eventually expand our membership to the point where we could support a peer warm line. People sometimes want other people in their community they can relate to. They say, will you please refer me to someone in my community I can relate to? So the first thing we do is see if there is a Mind Freedom affiliate. One of our goals for the next 5 years is to expand the number of affiliates that we have in communities so people are more likely to find psychiatric survivors and activists in their community. Right now, we currently have about 20. I'll give you a couple of examples. We have Mind Freedom Ireland, Mind Freedom Ghana, and in Africa. We have a newer, emerging, younger activist. Mind Freedom Seattle is one of our most dynamic affiliates to form as of late, and they've already done an amazing amount of good working in King County in the state of Washington.
Well, that's really cool. Is there anything else you want to add that I haven't asked you about, Sarah?
Yeah, I want to add the power of philanthropy is really important. Mind Freedom doesn't receive any government funding or any funding from pharmaceutical companies or religious organization. That really sets us apart, and it's really important. One of our most recent forms of support, which was very substantial, came from the Foundation for Excellence in Mental Health Care. They gave us a grant to fund our Voices for Choices campaign, and as a result of that campaign, we're able to expand the amount of online resources that we have. We have an organizing book for psychiatric survivors. We have a series of educational videos that were produced and involved to a great extent psychiatric survivors. So we have these resources on our website, and those resources would not have been possible if it hadn't been for the foundation, which basically is an alternative funding sources for our organizations like ours.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the work of the Foundation for Excellence for Mental Health Care, you can right now click and become a sustaining member. Sarah Smith with Mind Freedom International, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me.